Valentine's Day with a certain Italian maestro to remember, an officiating performance to massively overcome, and my God, will we talk about that. But most importantly, this Valentine's Day, Newcastle fans, we are in the fifth round and a step closer to, dare we say, those Wembley Archers. The instant match reaction to Aston Villa away is coming up, so do us a favour and make sure you stick around. Welcome back to Black White Banter, ladies and gentlemen, and a happy Valentine's Day to you. Although a lot of you watching this, it might be done. You might have had a very romantic weekend. Regardless, I'm sure it's a little bit better as you go to bed this Valentine's Day, knowing that Newcastle United have booked their place in the next round of the Cup. And to be totally honest with you, a little bit of more extra spice and satisfaction on the most romantic day of the year that we beat an Aston Villa side who we've been quite envious of all season, above us in the league, who just turned us over at St James's Park a matter of weeks ago, and watching that Villa Park Stadium empty towards the end was a lovely thing to behold. But anyway, Newcastle fans, before we get to the full match reaction and a lot of talk about that refereeing performance, do us a little favour, give us a little likey, Lou, whack that subscribe button and hit the hype if you think this video deserves to be hyped. Let's get hyped. Newcastle United have won 2 away games in 4 days. That's enough to get hyped about in itself, so go on. Whilst you're feeling a little bit fruity this Valentine's, hit that button and get Black White Banter across all social media. Lots of jokey stuff, not just always serious, lots of different analysis on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and sometimes Twitter. So yeah, go on, check me out across all platforms. Right, let's just talk. Yes, I'm delighted. Yes, the expression, a week is a long time in football, has never rang more true. This time last week, as I'm recording, was one of what felt like one of the darkest periods in the Eddie Howe takeover era, without a doubt. Booze it full-time against Brentford, looking knackered, lacking ideas, confidence, and everything that's followed in the aftermath. The talk of whether a managerial change is needed, and that'll continue on. I'm not denying that, and please don't jump down my throat, you who like to on YouTube, and I do get a lot of those comments, nature of the beast, oh, it's one game, that doesn't... I'm not saying that. The point I'm making is, fast forward 7 days, we've won at Tottenham. We should have won at Tottenham, a lot would argue. Down and out, sacking their manager the next day. But we've gone to Aston Villa. Yes, they changed their team, but my God, so did we. We had William Asula up front, and I think we were rightfully the winners, which leads me nicely into the refereeing performances. But yeah, huge week for Newcastle, and we can start looking upwards. Lots of talk in the build-up to this. I did a very short video about whether Newcastle should go very weak and play kids. I didn't agree with that at all. A heavy defeat when you are trying to get a bit of momentum is a lot more detrimental than the risk and the worry about a couple of injuries here and there. You cannot play a season in risk. Yes, the Bruno news was devastating, but I'm glad that Newcastle kept the level of strength there, and so it proved, because Newcastle were the rightful winners. But I cannot start this match reaction and talk about each half without just a little segment being about that refereeing performance. And I am not, anyone who watches my videos knows I am not one to ever shout, ball and scream at a camera and effing blind for videos and for clicks and all of that stuff. But I've never felt as close to doing that as that absolute, and I will swear, fucking shambles of a refereeing performance, officiating performance, including the linesman's in that as well. It was disgraceful. And I'm saying that as a winner of the football match and a fan who shouldn't be talking about that in the aftermath. My head was on Mars, and I've only just about come down for some oxygen from Mars because we won the game. But where do we even start with that? And I'm hearing that Les Ferdinand has talked that maybe this proves that not only VAR should never be whinged about ever again. You might be watching this thinking the VAR's ruined the game. Have certain elements, offside's been looked at for 6 minutes, the time it takes, still debating decisions, the fine-tuning of rules like the offside we saw against Joe Willock and his incorrect haircut, according to the pictures we saw. There are still elements of it that are wrong, but the actual video technology looking at big decisions, I don't think is. And if ever a match was proof that we should maybe be grateful that VAR exists to a degree, it's what we've just witnessed there. And let's just rhyme them off. I mean, first half, the one that will always stand out as the worst in that game, and a lot of you might say the penalty that wasn't a penalty for the handball that we eventually luckily scored from, the fact that the linesman has a free kick to watch, which is the best. I'm not a linesman. I've never studied to be a linesman. He has the best view. That's the best position for someone to watch a line. He doesn't have to keep up with play. The ball's not moving quick. He's waiting for that ball to be kicked once to keep an eye on who's... How he hasn't seen that is an absolute disgrace against him and his profession, because he has one simple task in those static scenarios to just keep an eye one place. And he's got so long to be ready, right? He's going to take the free kick. The fact that hasn't been picked up is a joke, so that's 1-0. There was 2 penalties in that first half that I thought would have at least been checked. The Lewis Hall one, to me, does look a penalty based off what we see get given very regularly. There is a leg out. Lewis Hall's not going to go down needlessly there when he's trying to drive the ball into the box. I thought the Harvey Barnes one looked like a tangle of legs, not from Barnes moving over deliberately, but because the Aston Villa player stuck his leg out. That one looked dubious. You've got the Luca Dean one that looks every bit a red card, and I think if that does go to VAR, it's 100% a sending off. I would give the referee a bit of leniency with that one, that it was fast-paced. He dives into Kieran Trippier really quickly, and you don't always spot how bad it was. You've got a second to see it. I haven't watched it back how far away the referee was. That's the one where I can leave a little bit of leniency if in a stretch. And then the second half, everyone watching that football match, commentary. Yes, I wasn't there tonight. I think I should stay away more with performances like that, results like that, should I say. But I did see us beat Spurs, so I won't be too harsh on myself. But of course, it sounds a banging 6,000 away end, the one that I don't go to. Everyone could see, I'm sure fans, it was at the Newcastle supporting end. The linesman is there. So not only is the referee not spotted it, he thinks it's outside. The linesman is watching the same phase of play, stood with nothing really else other than watching the line where the handball pretty much was. He hasn't even intervened to say. And I think there has to be an argument that there's an element of laziness now from referees, knowing that their decisions, if that's what the standard is like when you take VAR away, then we have gone backwards in terms of the quality of refereeing. And that's only going to make VAR worse, if that makes sense, if we rely on it more. Wow. And there was niggles, there was small ones. Jacob Ramsey in the second half, we are on a breakaway. He gets a foul given against him. It's clear that he gets a foot on the ball. Harvey Barnes getting booked for diving seemed a strange decision. It was just constant. And that is, in my lifetime on the planet, and maybe someone might remind me of a worse one, the worst officiating performance I have ever seen in my life at the top level of football. An FA Cup, Aston Villa Newcastle on a Saturday night on TV is the highest level of football. It doesn't get much bigger in terms of league games as we get told that this is the biggest and best country for football than that one. And it was absolutely shambolic, which makes the win even sweeter that we were able to overcome that. So look, let's talk about that first half. I thought we changed things up. Aston Villa changed things up. You expected that. I think it maybe added to it being a better FA Cup match. Both a little bit worried about injuries, both with European football around the corner. Voltemada comes in to support the striker. William Asula comes in for his first start since God knows when. So that was always going to be interesting. And for me, other than maybe the omission of Joe Willock, who you might have expected to play again, with the news about Bruno, which is devastating, is that going to be detrimental to our season? Yes, I think in the long run it is. But Sandro Tonali comes in and there's a bit of a weight on his shoulders there to step up a little bit, to really, really step up and probably show a level of performance we saw in our last FA Cup match when he had the same responsibility against Bournemouth. Defence pretty much picks itself. Great to see Lewis Hall come back in. And I thought Newcastle started the game better. You do get that fast press from William Asula. He's got energy to burn. I thought in the first 10 to 15 minutes, Voltemada was getting really involved. I've seen a lot of talk about Voltemada dropping a little bit too deep, especially in that first half when he was so involved. Whilst I would agree, I thought what he was doing with the football was really, really good. We got a bit of a reminder tonight for me of what Voltemada is capable of, and we haven't seen it a lot. Really good in tight spaces, always knowing where the player is for the pass. I thought he spread the ball wide to Kieran Trippier and Murphy time and time again, really, really well. But yeah, in terms of Asula being isolated, Voltemada was maybe dropping a bit deep. That being said, everyone's saying that Voltemada should stay high and play just behind him. I think against this Aston Villa side, it was more instruction. We would have been quite short in that midfield area against an Aston Villa side who I thought were picking up lots of pockets, which continues to be a concern for me in between the lines, between our midfield and defence. And Yes, we did have a lot of control early on. I thought we were quite good. But what has become a common theme for Newcastle, unfortunately, is that whilst we have a lot of the play, a lot of the control, it seems to be the other side in a lot of matches, too many matches, that create most of the chances. And Aston Villa created in that first half quite a lot of half chances. And yes, that's all he was. I think Malik Chow has a really good block with his chest. Leon Bailey should have done better in one scenario. And they were getting in behind a little bit. I thought Morgan Rogers looked every bit the player that should be starting for England at the World Cup. I thought he really, really impressed me in that first half. His defensive work was very good. The space he picked up, his ability to take players on, to get involved in every opportunity. And he was a problem for us. He looked the biggest threat out of any one of an Aston Villa persuasion. But of course, they take the lead. We need to do better from that set piece, regardless of it being offside. And I'm sure Eddie Howe will tell the lads that in the aftermath of watching this game back. Yes, it should never have been given in a million years, but we are just slow to what was, I'm not going to go as far as saying a clever set piece. It was an okay set piece, but Newcastle need to do better. We've got it all to do. And I think Harvey Barnes in the first half, whilst he was our main threat, I think he hit the side net, and at one point he was the one getting behind him looking most likely, with William Asula quite anonymous. I thought he was quite sloppy in the first half at times, Barnes. I thought he gave the ball away a couple of times too easily. He looked a little bit leggy, but of course you know what you are getting for Barnes, and that's why he looked our biggest threat. And I thought with Voltemade dropping so deep, yes, he was trying to make things happen. His ability to then get it forward and get in the box is still a gap that Newcastle need to continue trying to bridge to get him, the £65 million player, doing, yes, the link up, yes, the assisting, but also the scoring. We weren't creating very much at all, and Jacob Murphy, I thought that was probably one of the worst Jacob Murphy performances I've seen, and there's a bit of a trend this season. We know he's had his injury setbacks, that he's looking very short of the Jacob Murphy we know last season, who registered so many fantastic goals and assists. I thought he was sloppy with the ball. His crossing seemed off for large spells of the game. He was weak, as we always expect him to be, and he looked very one-dimensional. If Jacob Murphy wasn't crossing the ball in that match, what else was he really offering? And that's a concern. With Elanga on the bench, it was frustrating to watch because he was guilty of giving away fouls, guilty of being offside numerous occasions, and he was a massive, massive disappointment where Kieran Trippier needed more. And against Tottenham on Tuesday, Elanga give Kieran Trippier more. But 1-0, it's looking worrying that we aren't creating enough. You know, we all upset watching the game about the decisions that haven't been given our way, the offside, the Digne foul that should have probably been a red card. But then just before half-time, of course, that pendulum swings. They sloppily give the ball away, trying to recycle it. We recycle it ourselves and ping it forward as fast as possible. And what the Aston Villa goalkeeper is doing there, I do not know, but quite frankly, I do not care. Was it a goal-scoring opportunity? No, I think Jacob Murphy actually drags it really worryingly wide to sum up his half, but it's reckless. It's comical to watch him coming out of nowhere like Superman. So finally, what feels like a bit of justice, and justice was the key term in that match. If you think about the scoring from the non-penalty in the second half, they should have had a man sent off. They got a man sent off, and Eddie Howe suddenly has a lot to think about at half-time. No changes at the break, which surprised me a little bit with the Langas and the Gordons, especially with them going down to 10 men. But of course, Unai Emery had already sacrificed Leon Bailey, and what I thought was really interesting was how he set up in the second half. He allowed so much space down our right-hand side, our attacking right-hand side, because I would assume Emery thought that's where the less threat is. And with Jacob Murphy playing how he was, I'm not actually shocked that that's where he was less worried, because Harvey Barnes on the left, you know what he's going to do. He's going to try and cut in. He's going to get a shot off. He's known for that. And again, Jacob Murphy's half started very similar to the first. How the first ended. Just really sloppy, not really offering very much. Kieran Trippier getting forward at the grand old age of 35 at every opportunity. And the first 15 minutes of the second half, I'll be totally honest with you, disappointed me. We weren't creating enough. All of our attacking play was a bit hopeful, and that's going to continue to be a concern. Even if I look back to the Tottenham match, whilst, yes, we won that game, did we create enough against such a fragile Spurs side? No, I don't think we did. Is that a contributing factor from the likes of William Asula just being quite anonymous? I'm not going to put too much blame on Asula's poor day at the office on Nick Voltemade not being closer to him. He still needs to do better. He looks every bit the raw player that we know, yes, he's a box of frogs and that's what makes him a handful to bring on in the last 10 minutes. But when you start him in a big match against big opposition, that's kind of similar to what I know in my own head as William Asula to look like. Full of energy. He never stopped. In that second half, there was one moment he chased about 5 bodies down. But in terms of adding quality, the right runs, running the channels at the right times, creating threat and causing centre-backs problems, I don't think there was enough there. And the striking issues for Newcastle just continue with Wissa apparently picking up a knock. But yeah, that first 15 minutes wasn't good enough. But of course, that decision, I've touched on the referee at the start of this video. We all knew it was a penalty. It wasn't given. There's like, mind gone. I need a large brandy, and I don't even drink brandy at that point to figure out what the hell had just gone on. But justice, karma, call it what you want. Sandro Tonali reacts to the best, gets his shot off, and that bit of luck was the least that Newcastle deserved in that football match. And suddenly it's like, right, against 10 men, their backs are against the wall. We've just equalised. We've got bodies to come on. Let's go for it. Alanga, Gordon, made total sense. Murphy, God knows, penny for his thoughts tonight after that performance. Asula, he'll probably be frustrated with it, how his night went. But we've got Gordon, who'd offered something against Spurs on Tuesday. Alanga looking much, much better, as we all know. Let's put these to the sword and get ourselves in the next round without any extra time. And again, chances were of a minimum. A couple of half chances here and there for our centre-backs. But then Anthony Gordon, great opportunity, flashes just past the post. But the momentum, the emphasis, silent, halt end, shock. Everything was with us, and we just kept on probing and kept on probing. But nobody expected that beautiful Italian maestro to put his bottle of Moretti down for a second and think, do you know what? I'm going to absolutely twat that one and give everyone a Valentine's Day to remember. What a goal. What a strike. Sandro Tonali should have scored by now. The fact those are his first goals in February is not good enough. And I've done a video earlier, about a month ago, about the alarming difference in numbers between Tonali's attacking stats last season to this season. It's low red bars to high green ones last year. And that's a worry, but it probably tells you about his role in this side and how it's changed as we have in this transitional period, and Bruno offering more. But with Bruno out, Sandro Tonali simply needs to do more of that. And that was arguably one of Newcastle's best goals this season. It was just such a pure strike that no goalkeeper had a chance with. And then from there, Newcastle suddenly have something to defend. Aston Villa, you know, need to take risks, and he did. Watkins comes into the mix. Buendia, who caused us bother at St James's Park, comes on. Sancho for a bit of pace. They have to throw the kitchen sink at Newcastle, and that's going to open up more opportunities. We didn't really get that many with bringing Joe Willock on. Just little openings where we didn't quite make the right decision. I don't think Alanga maybe offered as much as many of us might have hoped coming on in the second half with his legs. He'd caused Digne all sorts of problems on the opening day of the season in that 0-0 draw on his debut, when he should have scored, but not so much in this one. But that wasn't too much of a worry with Newcastle winning the match. What I would say, for the last 10 minutes of that game, I saw Newcastle as managing the match pretty poorly, with Aston Villa trying to chuck everything at us, trying to play the ball out the back when we should have been going long, looking to get the ball into channels we should have done more of. Newcastle's game management at times this season, along with the shithousery that we don't see enough of, hasn't quite been there, and it's going to continue biting us in moments when backs are against the wall with leads or draws away from home. But again, I'll say that with a pinch of salt, because I wasn't too worried. Ramsdale wasn't really tested. It was lots of hopeful balls into the box. They'd had to play 45 minutes with 10 men, and they looked a tired side who were probably already thinking about that next Europa match, or next game for them. I don't know whether they play in the Europa this week, but Newcastle see it out, and of course we see it out in style with the birthday boy, Mr. Nick Voltemade. He gets a bit of luck. I don't even think Joe Willock passes it. That's from a tackle that it slips through to him, and I think the defender's tackle bounces off the Voltemade. But on your birthday, you deserve that bit of luck. By the way, Nick Voltemade, 24. Fucking hell, he looks 38. That's the Germans for you with the big hair and the moustache. No disrespect, Nick, but my God, you look an old 24-year-old. That was great to see. Great for his confidence. He's broke his duck. Tonali's broke his. And despite all of those awful refereeing decisions, imagine how different this video would have been, and how different all 6,000 fans leaving Villa Park would have felt had that game swung on a ridiculous no red card in the first half, a ridiculous goal from an offside that no one spotted, and then, of course, that non-penalty. We could, and that's why I wanted to really emphasise at the start of this video, been saying something very different about Newcastle's lack of progression in the FA Cup, being through such a shambolic display. And I'm sorry, it needs investigating. But Newcastle, in what has been the maddest week to support this football club for a while, have gone from Eddie Howe in, out, shaking all about, and him having to get asked all sorts from journalists about his future. The players have had a rally round after the Brentford match, which is nice to hear and seems to have gone some way. Am I frustrated that it's taken that this season to get us playing that little bit better? Yes, that shouldn't have to happen, but it has happened. We've won 2 away matches in a row for the first time in fucking ages. 5 goals scored, and most importantly, into the 5th round. And who knows, if Newcastle get a Mansfield at home, you are then 1 match away from going to Wembley. Wow. So many positive performances. Let's talk about Sandro Tonali. I thought not only because he scored twice, as lucky as his first one was, but he was all round much better. Does it take Bruno being out of the side? I've debated it before whether them two are a bit of a clash in terms of their freedom to express on the pitch. Tonali is given that defensive role when Bruno's playing. Regardless, we need Tonali to step up for the next couple of months. And I would go as far as saying him stepping up into that class that we know he is, because class is permanent, could go some way to just putting a bit of water on the fire of Bruno being out and help keep our season alive. That's how important Sandro Tonali will be, and I'm sure Eddie Howe was telling him that. I thought Jacob Ramsey put in a great shift against his old side. Not as good as Tuesday from an attacking point of view by no means, but he had the fire in his belly playing against Villa. Saw him kissing the badge in his warm-up, which was nice to see. And you always want to prove a point. I thought he was really solid again tonight. Defensively, I thought Newcastle were okay. Ramsdale, I'm not convinced on him, and I don't think he had too much to do for me to make too much of a comment on him. And Nick Voltemade, as much as, yes, he might have been dropping too deep at times, and I won't deny that in terms of Asula being so isolated and us not getting what we want from a £65 million striker in goals. I thought he was so tidy on the ball and he was really important, and he got himself involved. Not so much in the second half when Asula went off, which tells you a bit of a worrying story about where we are with our strikers, but generally speaking, deserved his goal for what was a pretty tidy, I think is the best way to describe his performance. So that's Newcastle into the 5th round. 2 wins in a row builds momentum, and momentum in football is a powerful thing. Were Newcastle fantastic tonight? No. Were Newcastle a better side tonight? Yes, and I would say exactly the same about Tottenham on Tuesday. Can we go to Karabag, 6 hours of travelling, and do that get a win in a very difficult, awkward stadium, in a weird, random country with the injuries piling up? Bruno is a massive loss, and I'm not going to deny that, and that was a bitter taste going into that match at Villa Park tonight. But make no mistake about it, going to Aston Villa, a place where I think they've won 13 of 17, I heard the statistic tonight, and winning 3-1 in the FA Cup is good. We don't have to worry about that FA Cup now. We're not playing in that until I think it's about the 10th of March. That one can be buried, and it's a Saturday. It's no more midweek matches. We've got bigger fish to fry in the Champions League on Wednesday, but that will ding, dang, do. And Sandro Tonali, I was going to ask whether you'll be my Valentine. You've just been 50, 60, 70, 80,000 Newcastle fans' Valentine with that lovely performance. But one thing we need to remember to sign off from this one is that I will never, and I'm sure you will never, complain about VAR ever again. Newcastle fans, get down, let us know your thoughts about our progression at the 5th round of the FA Cup. I'm sure you were pretty happy with that, but I want to know what you thought about the match itself. If you've liked this video and you've stuck around this long, give me a little likey loo. Whack that subscribe. That helps this channel to grow, and I would love this channel to grow as I'm trying to get more consistent with it. Whack that hype button, get Black and White Banter across all social media, and then get on your phone to your mum, because we might not be home for tea, because we might be booking those hotels for Wembley. I'll see you on the next one. How are you, lads?